La la la. Oh, good. So, ACI 16, class 7, rolling right along. I just want to say another thing about the prostrating, which is, I think.
Sorry, Joe, I
It's okay.
have tea and it seems like disappearing.
Oh, go get it.
I smell something.
Yeah, go get your tea.
No, it was on the ground.
There's a cup here. That's mine.
Is it under there?
Oh, there it is. It's behind that backside, I think. Maybe.
It's hiding. Oh, that's, yes, it did get started.
That's what I smelled. Sorry about that. I don't know if it was
Here, you
the
can have
chair.
No, I don't
You know what?
want
I
it.
probably almost I'll forget to drink anyways. I'll just have water. So I'm going to talk about prostrating for a second, anyways. So I'm supposed to prostrate so that hopefully, it gives me some kind of understanding. For one thing, that anything that I say, right? Anything that I say that anyone gets benefit from in a very high way is not really me, right? It's the teachings. It's the teachings, it's not me. And that is very good for quenching my pride, any pride I might come in here with, right? And then for the student to prostrate to the teacher, if the teacher doesn't appear to the student as a totally enlightened being, then, especially if the student has a clear understanding of karma and emptiness, and that it's not really the teacher's fault, right? It's the virtue in the person's heart, whether or not they see that person as an enlightened being or not as an enlightened being. And so when you prostrate with that understanding, you're planting very nice seeds in your mind to eventually see that person or any teacher or anyone in your life as a holy being. And it's also good for the student in the sense that it can help, I don't know, open up your mind so that you're not like the closed pot. Right? There's the three qualities of the,
Is the physical act as important as what's going on in your mind? Because for me, like, I'm injured, so I can't.
No.
So the actual act isn't what matters.
You could totally do the physical act and it mean nothing.
Right.
Oh yeah, you can go through the motions and you could, because everyone else is doing it, and that's pretty much a meaningless prostration, right? It's definitely, if you have an injury and you can't prostrate, you could be the most powerful prostrator in the room, simply by what's happening in your mind.
It seems the attention is really important.
It's absolutely intention. Any time that you think of your teacher in a holy way, you're making a mental prostration every single time. If you consider their good qualities, you're making a mental prostration every time. Supposedly, the physical act is also supposed to represent, like, you're supposed to go down, and like you're saying, you're the one that's got to help me. Give me the information. That's one way of looking at it. And you're supposed to get up fast, as in, I will also get up on my own and do it. I will also do the work. So the standing up is supposed to be, so they say you're not supposed to stay down too long. If you're thinking about it that way, Sometimes people just go down and are so overcome with devotion that they just can't get up. And they just stay down there at the Lama's feet. And it doesn't make any sense to stand up. And let's do our opening prayers again today, too. And did you have more of those handouts? Maybe Daniel could... Hold on. And you remember what we said yesterday about the prayers? Opening? Yeah.
There's some.
I'll have some here if you don't have any. Sure. You good to go? But I do have them here if you don't.
I need some more copies. That's good.
Are you? Yeah. Okay. So could you start us off today, Sonia?
No. Okay.
So you need the. Do you need something? Because I have it. I'll have it here.
I've got. I think dedication already. Yeah, if you have them now, it's okay. I've got it. Just need the dedication.
Yeah. Okay. There's all three right there.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I can do
What's that?
this. I don't know if I can do this.
All you have to do is say the first word.
I just say the first word of what he said.
So what the person who's doing the prayers, all they do. This is the thing that it's good to know if you're leading the prayers. Is all you need to do is say the first word, and then everybody joins in, and then the next round of like Sashi Puki, right? We wait for you to say Sashi, and then we all jump in, and in the third round we wait for you to go Sashi, and then we all go Puki, and the same thing is for the.
Let me do that one last.
Yeah, right. It's the second one. Sange. So we wait. So you're like Sange, and then we all join in. That's all you need to know is the first word.
Okay. So we do this and then refuge in here.
Yeah, we do offer the mandala first, and then we do refuge.
Okay.
So Sashi and the 3 times Sange.
Okay. Let's try.
This Sashi. That's all you gotta do. We'll do the rest.
Sashi.
Puki Joshin Meito Chamri Rabling Shi Nyende Genpadi Sange Shindu Mite Uwa Gidro Kunanda Shinwa Chupasho Idam Gurulada Mandala Kamritayami Ge Chudan Soki Choknama Janchu Baru Dakni Katsuchi Daki Jinin Gipe Sunanki Chola Penchu Sanye Jupasho Chudan Soki Choknama Janchu Baru Dakni Katsuchi Daki Jinin Gipe Sunanki Chola Penchu Sanye Jupasho Chudan Soki Choknama Janju Baru Daki Katsuchi Daki Jinamite Sunanki Chola Penchi Sanye Jupasho. And as the chant leader, you actually have you can actually tell us to do it better too. You could be like Sange, and then you could just say, "Oh, we're doing it again. That wasn't good enough." You do. You can. You have that. You have that right. I guess that's the chant.
Again.
Yeah. So we're moving on into the proof of future lives. So this class, we're going to talk about pramana, which is perception. We're going to talk about Buddhist logic and perception. You can think of it as ways to understand what we see and what we experience in the world, and ways to understand what we don't see, or what we might not be experiencing in the world, and ways to prove to ourselves things that don't exist that we think do, and ways to prove things that can exist that we think can't. And in Tibetan Buddhism, if you can prove something to yourself logically that it has a reality or exists without you actually seeing it with your own eyes, but you can prove it to yourself, they actually call that a valid perception. They call that a way to see something. And so we're going to give some background today on Buddhist logic. So first, we need to talk about, of course, as always, the books, where we're getting this information from, right? So the main book that we're going to be using, actually, first of all, no, let's just say the first one here. We're going to mainly be using Dharmakirti's work, which is a commentary on a different book. But so Master Dharmakirti's book is called An Explanation of the Commentary on Valid Perception. Or you could say Commentary on Valid Perception. And that's by Master Dharmakirti. The Commentary on Valid Perception. Seme Nandra, Commentary on Valid Perception. Sometimes it's often called the Pramanavartika. You see that, you hear that name a lot, the Pramanavartika. And that's Sanskrit. And that's by Master Dharmakirti. And he was around 630 AD. So we're using his book as the main text because he's actually commenting on a commentary that is called Light on the Path to Freedom, and that was by Gyaltsab. So Light on the Path to Freedom. And if you know Gyaltsab, well, who was Gyaltsab?
He was one of Jason Kappa's students.
Yeah, so one of Jason Kappa's spiritual sons. When I first heard that, I thought that was his actual son. Gyaltsab and Ketchup J. I was like, wow, he's so cool. He had these two sons, but they call them his spiritual sons because they were his closest students. And so Gyaltsab, he lived from 1364 to 1432. So Gyaltsab, one of the things that Gyaltsab said that is important for us is that he boldly declared that the kindest thing that Jason Kappa ever taught him was logic. That's a big statement because Jason Kappa would have taught him everything, would have taught him the whole Lam Rim, all the way up through the Tantras, right? Would have taught him everything. And if he's saying that logic was the kindest thing that he ever did, then that has to mean something. Because through logic, we can understand how it is that reality is working in ways that we can't see. And we can disprove ideas to ourselves. So today we're going to talk about logic and perception. And studying perception, how we see things, at its root is a study of mental images, right? Is the study of how we see things. And if we can get to the root of how it is that we see things, that's our doorway to see emptiness directly. That is our doorway to see emptiness directly. And in the same way that we had to get into the gokja, right, and discover what the gokja was so that we could identify what it wasn't, there are certain studies, for instance, quality and characteristics, or Chi Chedrak, where you're looking at an object and you're going back and forth and noticing all the ways that you're looking at an object, and you're trying to find out the source. Why is it, like why is it that there's a rectangular object with these round things on it out on the street? Why do I see it as a car? And where's car coming from? And all this kind of thing. And if we can logically work through our ideas about that, then we can see, they call this the supreme object. We can see the supreme object, which is, right before you see emptiness directly, you see dependent origination directly. Right? You see directly that you are projecting the image that you're looking at. Right? That's a very monumental moment. It's like the second most monumental moment. It's just before you see emptiness directly. And if you start seeing things in that way, like you're looking at something, and then you have this sudden understanding that what you're looking at is just colors and shapes. Right? Like you could be walking in the desert or something, and then all of a sudden you're looking around and you're looking at what was formerly known to you as a bush, but all you're seeing is lines made of green and with bigger shapes of green that are coming off of these other lines of green, and then you have a moment where you understand that in and of itself that thing has no self-nature, and that you directly experience yourself throwing the label onto it. And right about that time is right when you're about to see emptiness directly. And you can get there by studying pramana, by studying perception and logic. And we're going to do a little bit about that today. So what we need to start out with is the word for correct or valid perception. Okay. So in Tibetan, that's sema. You could T-S-E-M-A, sema. Means correct or valid perception. In Sanskrit, it's pramana. Pramana. And what we also need to make sure that we know at this point is that we're not in Majjhimika Prasangika right now. We're in a logic school. And so a correct or valid perception, according to the logic school, is not going to be the same as a correct or valid perception according to the Majjhimika school. But it's useful. It's useful to know as you go up the line, as you get a higher and higher understanding of how things are working, what is or isn't a valid perception. Right? The sutrists or the logic school, they're the same, right? The Sautantrika and the sutrist and the logic, they're all the same. There's the second of the 4 great schools. So what is a correct or a valid perception? And there's a difference between valid perception and correct perception, or accurate perception, if you want to get down to the nitty-gritty about it. Okay. And it is entirely relative to which school you're in. But for now, we're going to be hanging out in the logic school. So we're not going to go as far as saying that if, for instance, they would say, okay, Majjhimika Prasangaka would say, I'm looking at that cup, and I'm having a valid perception of that cup. Because it's a cup, right? Cup of water. But they would say, unless that I understood that I am putting the label on the cup, then I'm actually having an incorrect perception of the cup, right? It's valid but incorrect. But in the lower schools, in the Sutra school, it's a correct perception. I understand that I'm looking at a cup. So it's interesting how that works, because what is the definition of an existing thing? No one here can tell me what the definition is of an existing thing, because there is no definition of an existing thing.
Tamadru.
Well, there is a definition of an existing thing.
Sure.
You can't tell me what it is.
Tamadru.
Sure.
That which is perceived by an fresh, unerring state of mind.
You don't have to go that far.
Okay, that which is perceived by undeceived state of mind.
Well, you could shorten it even more.
Anything that you perceive
with a valid perception. Yeah. So anything that you see with a valid perception exists, according to Tibetan Buddhist lineage. Anything that you see with a valid perception is existence. That is something that exists. Okay. To give you an idea of of the difference between valid versus correct in this school. Well, we had an example last night actually. It was I walked out of the space. I had a valid perception that the back door of Dave's car was open. The hatchback was open. I walked out, I saw it open, and my mind went, oh, Dave left it open so we can put stuff in. That was a valid perception for me. But it was an incorrect perception, because David had not left it open. Someone else had opened it and stolen something from his car. Right? Another example could be, there's a glass in front of you, or you go to the fridge and you pour a glass of milk into the cup, and it looks like it's a valid perception of a nice white glass of milk, and you drink it and you think, and it's bad. Then it was an incorrect valid perception. The milk was bad, but you looked like it was going to be good, right? That's kind of an addition, because valid is something that you see that is well-founded on what you understand, right? And correct is more like accurate, right? Accurate. So we need to know these distinctions at the beginning, right? Sonia.
Can you give an example of not valid?
Yeah, we're going to give you some nice examples of not valid. Yes, it is. It is. I have a nice list here of somewhere. Yeah, here we go. Here are 5 ways. Here are 5 ways which things are not accurate perceptions. One of them is you see it completely wrong. For instance, like the opposite to the way they really are. What's a good example of that? When you're sitting there in your car and you look and there's a bus going by and it feels like you're going in reverse, right? You have this perception of like you're moving, but really you're not moving. It's the bus that's moving, right? Or you're driving by and you look and the bus looks like it's going in reverse, but really you're going forward. I have a great example of that. This is a while ago, and I was driving my car, and there was a car in front of me. It was a family car full of mom and dad and some kids, right? And I'm rolling up to this car, and this car starts backing into me. Like I'm parked, and there's a light up ahead, and this car starts backing into me, and I'm like honking my horn, right? Like I'm honking and honking and honking, but they keep coming, and finally they hit me, right? They hit me, and so I'm thinking, why would this person like reverse into me like that? So he gets out of his car, and I got into my car, and I'm like, what? And he's looking at me like, what, are you crazy? And then I realized what happened. I was rolling forward, right? So I was rolling forward, like honking my horn, trying to get him not to hit me, right? It's a great example, right? And that's like that was a great invalid, non-correct, totally ass backwards perception, right? But that's how we're always doing that. That's just like a physical example of what we're always doing. We're always thinking that the world is coming at us, but it's not. We're coming at the world. Right? We're always like honking. Stop that. But it's us. We're going forward. The world isn't backing into us. Right? So, if you change the situation and realize that if what if I had been the Arya in that situation, right, and known that I was actually creating the situation, I could have stopped it. And that's what the Arya does. The Arya stops it, right, by understanding the world isn't backing into him. He stops honking his horn and blaming everybody else. Another way that is not an accurate perception is if it's called doubt. If your mind is split, right? Like this whole thing about was the world round or was it flat? There's this whole thing going on, right? And there's lots of that going on in this world today. I remember when butter was good I remember when margarine was the best thing for you and butter was evil. I remember that. And then it's like all this, nobody can decide, right? Nobody can decide. And now it's like margarine's out and butter's back in, which is a good thing. Another invalid perception in this school is actually if you're remembering something, recollection. So like if I held this up to you, you're looking at this watch and you're seeing it, that's a valid perception. But as soon as I go like this and I say, okay, now imagine the watch, that's an incorrect or invalid perception of the watch, because it's not a direct, fresh perception of the watch. Other schools say that actually that is a valid perception, but this school says it isn't a valid perception. Okay. Another way that the perception can be invalid is assumption, presuming to know something, which is really just a guess. We do that all the time, right? Someone walks in and their body's moving a certain way and they look a certain way, and then you just assume things about them. Like a good example of that is someone is treating you rough all day, and you take it personally, like they're mad at you or something, and then you find out the next day that they had a really sore back that day or something, right? And it was never about you, and they're like, "Oh, sorry, man, I was in pain all day," right? And that's like a good example. That was not, Another way is the old is it a leaf or is it a squirrel thing, right? Something goes across the road and you think, "Oh, there goes a squirrel," and you look at it and you realize it's just a leaf. It appears to you, but you don't actually ascertain what it actually is. That's another example of an invalid, not an inaccurate perception. We all know that one. So generally speaking, until we get nitty-gritty about it, valid generally means correct. It's, if you're going to go valid but incorrect and stuff like that, that's generally up into the higher schools. Okay. So most of the time, most of us are having thousands of valid perceptions. I don't know what the ratio might be. The ratio might be 1,000 valid perceptions to one invalid perception, right? All day long, everything you see is most of the time would be valid, right? It's important to know that, because you can get into trouble where we were, like with Daniel the other night, where we're wrestling with the whole cat idea, and then he seemed to be like going, "Well, I don't even think the thing exists anymore," right? And it's you have to get that line where no, the cat is there. If you don't see him as a cat, that's your karma. But the cat is there, one way or the other, right? So it's valid. Reality is valid. Reality is validly happening. What we need to figure out is why it's happening, and how we created it, and what we can do about it. And that's actually third class today. Yeah. So the main purpose, the first purpose of Buddhist logic is one thing. And no one here can tell me what that could possibly be, the one main thing why we would study Buddhist logic as taught by the Buddha. Takmadu. So someone can tell.
Yeah.
You can tell.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that we don't judge other beings.
That's it. Right there. Lord Buddha's famous statement, right? If you, I or someone like myself, in other words, omniscient, I or someone like myself can judge a person, but no normal person should judge another, or he or she will fall. And when he says fall, he means to the lower realms. And this revolves, he tells that in a form of a story. It's he's teaching and he's telling a story to his monks, and he's telling a story about these two monks that lived in previous lifetimes to his lifetime, and he talks about the story of how there was these two monks, and they were in a monastery, and there was a nearby town, and there was one monk that kept leaving the monastery and going teaching the laymen and all that stuff. And he was gathering students and becoming popular. And the monk that was in the monastery was becoming concerned, and so he would go out and investigate, and he decided on his own that this monk was behaving in an egotistical way and collecting students and had bad motivation and wasn't really helping anybody, and that he was bringing down the name of the monastery and all this. And so he went on a witch hunt, right? And convinced other monks in the monastery that he was right, and that this other monk was doing bad things with bad motivation. But then he found out that the actual monk had pure motivation and was helping a lot of people and was doing great things, and he was attracting people to Buddhism, and that because he had done that, he not only had he judged him wrongly, but he also created disparity in the Sangha, right? He got people on his side. And then when that monk, even though he had been in the monastery his whole life, when he died, he went to a hell realm and spent thousands and thousands of years in a hell realm before he made it all the way back up to a human and up to finally Buddha, right? Lord Buddha said, well, that was me. That was me. I did that. And that is why you should never judge another, because you don't know. And so logic, perception and logic can really help you understand that just because a positive quality doesn't appear to be there in a person does not mean it isn't there. And it is the very nature of judging others that gets us into so much trouble. So much trouble. Because we're doing it all the time. It's automatic. It's like your karma can't stop it from happening or something. And you can't, yeah.
Is there a difference between judging the actions of another as opposed to judging the person?
Big time.
So, for example, whoever stole Dave's computer last night, I could say that action was wrong, or that action shouldn't have been done, without necessarily saying the person who did that action is a bad person.
Yeah, that's a very important distinction to make, actually. Because... And they say that very clearly. Just because that you don't really know who this person is and you don't know what their motivation is, does not mean that you then don't stop evil from going down. If you see someone doing something harmful to another person, you must do your best to stop it. But it's like you said, judge the action, but don't make the mistake of judging the person, because you don't know who they are and what their motivation is. And if anything, a good Buddhist, especially a Bodhisattva, would have great compassion for the person that was doing the wrong, right? It's like if that's as high as a view as you can get of it, then you have to just have compassion for the. Yeah. That's the difference between someone who's been studying these kinds of things and not. It's like their heart goes out to the person who's creating more harm for themselves, right? Yeah, that's a good question. So let's talk about types of valid perceptions. There's two basic types of valid perception. What do you think they are? If you were thinking about ways to see things, right? Well, that would be a valid perception. What would you think would be the two ways that you could see something?
Honest understanding.
Another word for that, maybe? Deduction, maybe? Deducting?
Deduction?
Yeah, deduction, right? And then, so there's going to be deduction, and then seeing it directly, right? Direct valid perception and deductive valid perception. So the direct valid perception, that is used to see things like in a normal world, right? Shapes, colors, everything that we see in our world that just appears to us normally every day, that we see with our eyes, right? Obvious reality. Obvious reality. You don't need logic to see it, right? So the other one that we talked about, deductive valid perception, is used to see hidden things. Hidden reality. You know, an example of that would be, for instance, a small example of that would be, you know, you're looking at the watch, right? I have the watch in my hand. And then I just put it behind my back. Right now, you're having a deductive perception of the watch behind my back, right? And if I do this, right, you have a deductive valid perception that the watch is falling, right? That was your deduction. And it's valid because, you know, it'd be pretty hard for me to make that sound without it just being the watch falling, right? So they would call that a valid deductive perception. So that's one of the things. That was sort of a hidden reality, right? So there are three levels of reality that we're going to talk about. There's obvious reality, there's hidden reality, and then there's deeply hidden reality. Shintu Kokir, deeply hidden. Kokir is hidden, right? Shintu Kokir, deeply hidden. So to hidden reality, which is the second level of reality, we use deduction until we see it directly to things like emptiness itself, right? So when I talk about the emptiness of the watch, when I wave the watch around and say, you know, there is no watch here that is independent of you labeling it as a watch, and so the emptiness of the watch is what isn't in the watch, right? That's the emptiness of the watch. Right now, in that instant, you're having an intellectual, deductive perception of emptiness, right? You can see emptiness directly, and then you're seeing it, then it's obvious reality to you in that moment, right? It's no longer hidden. Another example would be to a blind person, right? To a blind person, pretty much everything is hidden reality. Like, if you're going to talk visually, right? Now, what do you suppose deeply hidden is? What would be some things that would be deeply hidden? I'll give you an example. Okay. It's sort of like you can get okay, John, sure, I can get that this watch is not watched from its own side. But what if I said to you, well, neither is that rug, you know, but why is it gray? Why does it have lines that go this way and lines that go that way? Why is there white and gray? Why am I looking at white and black and gray in linear patterns? That's deeply hidden. It's easier to see emptiness than actually understand the inner workings of karma. And that's why it is said that only a totally enlightened Buddha can, in its own mind or in your own mind, say, well, it was because of that. If it's maybe it's a pleasant sensation to look at the rug. Well, it was because of that one time that you stroked this man's arm when he was feeling down for a second. I think it was the year 1211. Right? That's why you see that rug. Only an enlightened being can pull something like that off. That's deeply hidden reality. So we use because karma is a deeply hidden reality, then we have to rely on an authoritative source to try and understand these deeply hidden things. So in order to even buy that idea, first we have to decide that this being that we're listening to is an authoritative source. Right? Why should we believe the Lord Buddha? Why should we think that this is a person, this is a being that wouldn't lie to us about these things? And this takes us to the big reason, right? This is the big reason why that we say the Lord Buddha is unerring in his teaching, and that he is the only being that came along and described our suffering perfectly, right? He described that just to be living is suffering. He popped out and said, well, guess what? Just to be born is to die. He popped out and said, everything is impermanent, nothing lasts, everything is changing. Everything you're experiencing in your life is leading to suffering. You eat the ice cream, it's great until you have 4 more scoops, and then it hurts. Right? I really like that personally, and I think a lot of people are drawn to that get into these kind of studies, because it's like for me it was like it took the blinders of denial off. It's like how are you going to actually change your reality unless you understand what's going on, right? Unless you can really take a step back and go, wait a second, all these things that I thought were bringing me pleasure were all short term. And you look back and you can see that it's true. They've all been short term, and yet I chased them and chased them and chased them. None of them worked. And I'm still doing that, right? I've experienced the failure of trying to make something work so many times. Why am I still doing it? It's this pattern we have ingrained in our mind. It's like we're hardwired like that, right? So it takes a being like that comes along and says, you've been suffering since you came into this world, and you'll suffer till you leave. But you can do something about it, right? And that's the basic premise that the Buddhists decide that he is unerring, is that he was the only one that described our suffering perfectly. And that leads us to the qualities of an enlightened being. Some of the qualities of an enlightened being that we need to know. Like, for instance, an enlightened being is omniscient, right? Now, omniscient, we're going to talk right now about what the important qualities of omniscience means to us. So omniscience means, okay, this being is aware of all phenomena at all times, past, future, and present. At all times, all phenomena. Like they say that it's so far from the concept that a normal mind can think of, so that they say things like an enlightened being can smell a flower that's in someone's hair in Mexico with his pinky. Right? It's like, it's so, right, his pinky, this being's pinky can see far into the millennia of the past, right? And this being knows the molecular structure of every thing on the planet, right? And then so the Buddhists go, well, that's nice. Who cares, right? How does that help me? How is that going to help me? The important qualities of being omniscient is, we mentioned this in another class, is that this being knows exactly what to pick up and what to put down in order to be a happy being. So this being has figured out exactly what to do to become an enlightened being. This person has figured exactly what not to do in order to become an enlightened being. So this being can help us, because this being can say, well, like this being, for instance, this being could hear the story of the laptop going missing, right? And it's like, okay, this being is not going to try and stroke Dave's ego and right, try and make him feel better by saying, oh, I feel so sorry for you and this, all that. That's not going to help Dave. It's not going to help Dave. What will help Dave is this being will teach Dave about karma. And then, so then Dave has this opportunity with this laptop, right? It's like, well, I can get angry about it and I can blame this person for me losing my laptop. Or I can study karma so well that I know why I lost the laptop and everything that's involved around the laptop, anything that I'm attached to around the laptop, like, and he can have, actually, it's fuel for many meditations on grasping to this or that. Like, it's such great fodder, right? And it's like how else, right? Unless someone like rips from you the stuff that you're attached to, how are you going to know you're attached to it, right? So then he can sit there and then he can actually decide it was an enlightened being. He can decide that an angel came, kicked open the door and just tripped off at his merry way. Oh, I did another good deed. I just saved Dave from eons of suffering. Right? But how's Dave going to get there? Right? Someone's got to teach him about karma. Someone has to teach us about karma for us to get there. So at the very least, in the very basic, the very least is the understanding of how it could even happen, right? And we're going to talk about that, I think, in the third class. Is nothing good can come from something bad, right? And then it gets really crazy, because what if it was a good thing? I did it. I have the laptop. I always wanted a Mac. I miss my old Mac. I used to have a Mac. It's got all this great iTunes on it, some songs that somebody wrote. Yeah, it gets crazy, right? What if, in the instant you're like, ah! But then later, maybe it's the best thing that ever happened. So, was it? But it's all relative to the moment, right? So an enlightened being comes along and gives Dave the opportunity to use that moment as a way to become enlightened. If that enlightened being doesn't come along and say something like that, how's Dave going to pull that off? He's just going to get mad at the guy and, maybe hire a private investigator and harm him. Search his Mac down and punish that man. Right? Right? And you can see clearly, like we can see clearly right now, the difference between those two states of mind. The blamer and the one that takes responsibility on himself. Just like you said, though, depending on where your view is, if we had came out right at the right time, and somebody had the soles of his feet sticking out of the back. You're not going to stand back and say, "Oh, great, man, you're stealing Dave's laptop. Good job." No, you're going to stop it. Right? And omniscience as opposed to omnipotent, right? The Buddhists are very against this idea that there could be like an unchanging, omnipotent creator, God, right? That is pulling all the strings. Because if there was something that existed, then that pretty much takes away your free will, and that pretty much, it negates so much. It just doesn't explain so many things, right? We're going to get into that a little bit later. But there are people that will, hold to that line, and you can't debate them. You can't try and disprove it. If they hold that there's a creator God that's pulling all the strings, it's not. You can't go to them and try to prove that it's not true, and with things like, well, why? So what? So there's this God that decided that this baby would die in the womb, or this baby. Who is this? This God is making you breathe. Whether I breathe or not is entirely. This being is doing all this. Anyway, I'm not going to go there right now. So, and there's a funny thing. I like the way they say this. Is if the important qualities of omniscience were that about the dust specks on Pluto, or about the deep atomic structure of the core of the Earth, and if that is what's important about omniscience, then go get teachings from an eagle, because they can see everything. They're up there and they can see for miles and miles and miles. Well, you can go to someone like that and get teaching, right? What we need is someone who can tell us about karma, so that we can then become just like them. That's all they want. They want to see you without any suffering in your mind. So Master Dignaga, Master Dharmakirti. Dignaga, yeah. So Master Dignaga, he actually wrote a book on logic before, he was actually before Gyaltsen. I think that's all mixed up. I remember this being very confusing in ACI 4. I think I might be getting that wrong. No, yeah. Master Dignaga came first. The Compendium to Correct Perception by Master Dignaga, that was first. Um, yeah. Anyway, in his book, he wrote this famous quote: "I bow down to the protector, those gone to bliss, the teacher, those who wish to benefit living beings, and those who have turned into ones with valid perception." I'll say it again because it's a homework question. I bow down to the protector, those gone to bliss, the teacher, those who wish to benefit living beings, and those who have turned into ones with valid perception. I bow down to the protector, those gone to bliss, the teacher, those who wish to benefit living beings, and those who have turned into ones with valid perception. So, who is a person of valid perception? So they're saying that a person of valid perception is used to describe an enlightened being who has only valid perceptions. Do you want me to say it again? Did you get it all?
This is the last part.
I bow down to the protector, those gone to bliss, the teacher, those who wish to benefit living beings, and those who have turned into ones with valid perception. So, person of valid perception, they're saying that this being is valid perception, and that the connotation is that they cannot lie, right? They cannot lie. So, like I was just saying, so Master Dignaga, what he's saying is there is this one person, right? There is this one person who is valid. There's this one person who cares about people in an ultimate way. The teacher, right? The Buddha, the one who has already gone to bliss, the one who can protect you. I bow down to this person. I bow down to this person. So what is, remember we talked about, what is the definition of a valid perception? You were saying it earlier. The actual definition of a valid perception itself. Yeah, a fresh, unmistaken state of mind. So they're saying that an enlightened being is valid perception. It is fresh, unmistaken state of mind. And when they say fresh, they mean that he's not seeing it as in the fresh perception of this watch is the instant that you see it. This is, seeing it in your mind after is not a fresh perception. This is a fresh perception. What they're saying is an enlightened being is always having a fresh perception. Fresh perception. And not only are they having they're having a fresh perception of all reality of all times, all the time, right? And they're unmistaken in that what they see is true. Unmistaken in the sense that we're all unmistaken about, you look at the burner, it's glowing, and you think, okay, it's hot, right? Like that, unmistaken, right? So, along in Dharmakirti's time, there was a group of a Hindu group in ancient India, and they're called the Shravakas. They call them the Shravakas.